Hello everyone. I have been researching all day and I wasn't satisfied with what I was finding out, so I kept pushing back my broadcast time. So I'll just wait to see if anybody's gonna come on. Hope you've been having a good Sunday, whatever is going on. And I have found some very interesting details. Having to do with the government's response, the testing. This is all about coronavirus now. The testing, why it was so slow. And I've got my helper here.
It tastes like strawberry cake.
Ooh, that's great. It's not. Now I'm starting my YouTube live video. And there we go. Okay. Oh, there. Hi, Raul. Oh, wow. I feel like I've been drowning in scientific journals and medical papers, and I've just been reading up a storm trying to figure out what is going on with coronavirus. The first thing I wanted to say is a lot of people have been arguing about whether coronavirus is like the flu. Now, when I say coronavirus, I mean novel coronavirus, which is actually classified as COVID SARS-2. And what I want to say that I discovered is it's not flu-like, but in its more severe forms, it's actually pneumonia-like. I had forgotten that pneumonia could be viral. And so the more severe cases, especially those that have to be hospitalized or those who are immune compromised, have been the ones that have gone into pneumonia, turned into pneumonia. And the case that they used the new drug that hasn't been approved yet, remdesivir from Gilead Sciences, the case, it was patient 0 that was in Washington State, and he had developed viral pneumonia. So basically they were seeing the new novel coronavirus in his lungs while he was in isolation. And they so this experimental drug that's being given on compassionate grounds, right to try, is showing promise. They're in the third stage of trials right now across the globe. And hold on one second here. Honey, can you turn that down, please? Everest, sweetheart, can you turn that down, please? Like a lot. Thank you. So this drug, remdesivir, made by Gilead Labs, which is based in Foster City, California, it is finished. They're finishing up the third phase of trials. They have 1,000 patients globally that they have been administering this drug to. They expect results on this drug by April. They are doing 2 different trials. One is with those who have severe manifestations, both 5-day and 10-day dosing. And the other trial is moderate manifestations, 5-day and 10-day dosing. I'm seeing more information on remdesivir popping up on the web, so keep your eye out on that. What I wanted to say about that is I also saw on the website of Gilead Sciences that they already stockpiled the drug remdesivir. They stockpiled it after the Ebola outbreak and scare, and it was originally developed for Ebola. So according to the Gilead Sciences website, they said they have stockpiled this drug that hasn't yet been approved. They did not specify how many doses they had, but they also said that in conjunction with their clinical trials, they have ramped up both internal and external production of this drug. this is really encouraging news, especially the part about stockpiling and producing, because we don't want any bureaucratic or corruption-related delays like we saw with the testing. So I am going to go get into the testing problems that occurred. But I also want to talk about, first of all, what the Trump administration has done right. So basically, even the New York Times science writer said that Trump had done the right thing by closing all flights out of China early on. And I believe that was in late January. So I can't find that article anymore, because obviously we have the breathless, screeching outrage at the alleged incompetence of President Trump and how he could let this virus get out of control. We see that The Atlantic has been leading that coverage. Politico did an expose on the CDC's testing kit problems. And so I've looked into all that. First of all, what the Trump administration did right. If you would bear with me just 1 second. Okay. Can you go, if you're going to have this loud, can you go in the other room? I can't believe I'm being forced to do this right now.
Did you say commercial break today?
Commercial break? I should have. That was my dead air commercial break. Hello, I'm back. Okay, so initially we had an article, not even an opinion piece, but an article written in the New York Times by their science writers saying that Trump had bought a lot of time by closing the border early on. And then we also know that after his Oval Office address, and as of Friday, they closed flights from Europe, and now they're going to be closing flights from the UK by Monday. So no matter how you look at it, if you want to look at Hong Kong, Singapore, and South Korea's response, you will see that travel restrictions, and China's response, travel restrictions and social distancing were imposed early on. And so there's no place that is saying that travel restrictions aren't a good idea. I think at some point, especially when the Ebola outbreak happened in 2014, the World Health Organization had put out some kind of advisory saying that travel restrictions don't help. But the article that I'm referencing that was praising President Trump said that the literature is actually inconclusive about whether travel restrictions inhibit the spread of a virus, and that William Henry Harrison, forget if he was the president in one of the outbreaks that they had. He kept a ship offshore for like 30 days, and that actually helped stop the spread of the virus. So I remember when Ebola happened, we didn't have any travel restrictions at all, and it was amazing how quickly Ebola got shut down. They isolated everybody. They isolated that nurse that had gotten it. I think maybe only 2 people died who had traveled from Africa. So we got lucky on that one. But we also had a lot of time to plan ahead. And right now I would give the deep state bureaucracy / health healthcare research companies and corporations, I would give them probably a C on preparedness. I think that we are dealing with a pneumonia-like illness, which, obviously 80% of cases are mild. But as the director of the CDC did point out, he said the reason we're not sure of how this is going to go is that we don't know the trajectory of novel coronavirus. We know the trajectory of most influenza types. So even though it does kill a certain amount of people, we already have like a predictable path, meaning, we know when it'll spike. But with novel coronavirus, we're being tested, I think. It's funny because I think coverage has been pretty overblown and pretty lacking in nuance and facts and complete facts, and it hasn't helped at all. It's also been contradictory. And so I think in that respect, the fear that was generated was completely unproductive. But I also think that, we still have to stay on our toes about the differences in this new virus and why it's spreading, especially to celebrities and random people, almost, it seems like. So, what I want to talk about is the testing. I finally discovered why South Korea and China had rapid testing so rapidly. There is a company based in North Carolina called Biomedomics, and they developed a blood test that is almost as easy as a pregnancy test, and it gives results within 15 minutes. And since I've spent the last 48 hours on and off reading about how complicated testing for a SARS-like virus is when you're dealing with just saliva and from the upper respiratory and then also samples from the lower respiratory, when you're dealing with that, it is so dang complicated. It is a polymerase chain reaction that replicates the RNA of the virus, and you have to have something to compare it to. So you have to have the dangerous material with you to compare that to what you've just amplified through DNA RNA amplification technology. And so that is the most reliable test, and it could very easily go wrong. It's very delicate, and we did see that it had gone wrong. Now, the blood test so far had shown a lower incidence of accuracy. So out of 525 suspected patients, 352 patients were positive, 12 were false positives. So it says it's 89% sensitive or accurate. Now, I'm stating this from a press release discussing this new blood test. So, South Korea and China had a new blood test. It takes 15 minutes. The FDA has not approved it yet. And at first I was thinking, what is wrong with them? Is it just a matter of us being so laborious with our huge government structure that they couldn't approve this rapid blood test? Or is it that it's not as accurate? Because even the press release about this rapid blood test from Biomedomics in North Carolina said that they recommend using a polymerase chain reaction test, which is the gold standard and what they have in the United States, as verification. Well, we know that they haven't done that. We know they haven't used a polymerase chain reaction test as verification in China and South Korea because they don't even have those made yet. We don't even have enough of them in the United States. What I was trying to see is whether any of these companies who make these kits had sold a bunch of their kits to China, right away, and therefore depleted their stockpile. I still haven't ruled that out. Okay, so the main diagnostic giant that creates the kits is Qiagen. They are actually based in the Netherlands. They're a multinational corporation, and they have also have a factory in Germantown, Maryland. Okay, now their competitor is Roche, which is a Swiss-based Roche Diagnostics. And right now, I was able to trace back. We heard there was a problem with a reagent. and the reagent, it was either there was a shortage or there was a problem. And it's very hard to determine which. But all of the articles about this talked about this shortage of reagents. And then when you go to the Qiagen website, it's Qiagen. Yeah, PCR is not that fast. They call it real time, Garen. They call it real time PCR. That's one of the tests that the CDC released on February 4th. But it's not real time, and it still has to be sent somewhere, and then it's 4 hours, I think. So I'm not really sure. Oh, my pleasure, Samia. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching, everyone. Hello, welcome. I've been discussing some of the good developments, and we're still waiting to hear about remdesivir, that drug that's made by Foster City, California-based Gilead Sciences. They have stockpiled this drug already when they developed it for Ebola. But they're manufacturing more because they're anticipating a huge need, which is good news, which hasn't really gotten out very far. It has been used on a compassionate basis already in Washington State with good results, but it has not been approved by the FDA yet. The clinical trials are in their third stage. So next, I was talking about the governmental response, whether it's the bureaucracy, the deep state, the CDC, these guys have been there forever, or it's the Trump administration. And there's a lot of finger pointing, which I actually was surprised. It kind of took me by surprise because, watching this whole thing roll out, just to catch up folks who are just joining us now, the reason it's not like the flu is it's more like pneumonia, and it's in its most severe form. Novel coronavirus is like pneumonia. When it gets to the lower respiratory tract or whatever, lower respiratory area, then it becomes a problem, and that is, of course, pneumonia with the virus getting into the lungs. And so that actually is what the first patient had who had good results from remdesivir. So it seems like the really bad development of novel coronavirus, which is viral pneumonia, has showed promising results of being contained and even diminished with fever, no fever anymore, after applications of remdesivir. Okay, so then it's funny. On January 17th, the Centers for Disease Control were bracing for novel coronavirus to come to the United States. On the 19th of January, it was the first patient. He flew in from Wuhan. Interestingly enough, they had all these screening sites at Los Angeles Airport, New York, and I think Miami, but they didn't have one in Seattle. That might be why Seattle became such an epicenter for rapid spread. But anyway, this young man, 35 years old, had traveled directly from Wuhan and presented with symptoms on January 19th. And then we know that the testing was conducted for him. It was conducted accurately because it was sent back to the CDC, and he got the results by the next day, January 20th. So by January 30th was the first person-to-person transmission, and it was a Chicago couple in Illinois. Oh, really? You know about Fauci, huh? Is that how you say his name? Fauci? Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that guy. Wait, I can't read your whole comment, Garen. Ooh, yeah, I've seen some pretty damning things about him online, but of course that's just hearsay. Anyway, so the reason that this is a little more alarming than, let's say, influenza, which we already know kills a lot of people per year, is that, like I said, we don't really understand the trajectory yet of novel coronavirus. So, and another recap I wanted to give is the reason that South Korea had drive-by mobile testing sites, and the reason China tested so many people is because they bought 500,000 tests. I didn't say this before, but they bought 500,000 rapid tests from Biomedomics. And now, Biomedomics has a China-based sister company called Jiangsu Medomics. It's almost as if the Chinese were quite prepared for this, I'd say. Quite prepared. So anyway, they had the test already. It's speed. It has... The traditional test takes a lot longer, but the company, Biomedomics, recommends that you do the traditional test after to verify. And so I think it's possible that actually there were fewer cases in China and South Korea than they actually said, because this rapid blood test is only 89% accurate. And so it was a good approach, but kind of like with a blunt instrument. And it probably gave them an excuse to shut everything down and impose social distancing, which is very interesting. But they did the right thing. Obviously, it sounds like their new cases are diminishing in China now. But for all those who haven't heard my previous broadcasts, there is the only level 4 microbiology lab in China is in Wuhan, at Wuhan University's virology lab. It's a level 4 lab, which is the only one that is classified to carry bioweapon technology. And it was located near the animal market. And of course, we had our little fact-checking sites from the MSM saying, no, this is not a bioweapon. I got out to the animal market. No. You know how they do that. And yet, I happened to come upon a column in the New York Post, which everybody knows leans a bit right. But the man who wrote the column has an amazing background. His name is Mosier. And he was a graduate student at Stanford University who was studying China, and he was actually over there studying their forced abortion techniques and practices when China got really mad about that, and they kicked him out, and they made Stanford kick him out of his postdoctoral program too. So this guy knows what he's doing. He has something called the Population Research Institute, because of course the forced abortions were to control their population, but he is pro-life, and he is very concerned about population control that is ethical. So this is the guy. He knows China. He has a history in China. He writes that absolutely the researchers in this lab have been known to sell their testing animals on the market, which seems like a really, really stupid idea. Like, how much money would make that worth it if you're infecting your own community? Which, that sounds really strange, but in any case, this is very possibly got out of the lab there. I wouldn't rule it out, but I'm not claiming that specifically. There's just not enough information out. So, let's see. I forgot that I'm also live on here. Yeah, I'm talking to you too. Oh, well, I have 1 person on YouTube and I have 8 people on Facebook. Okay, so back to the testing. Then the more reliable testing that the CDC put out, as we all know, they rolled out with great fanfare on February 4th, and very quickly it seemed like they were getting inconclusive results. And I think Politico claimed it was because the CDC was trying to test for a much wider array of respiratory illnesses, and so it was like they were wanting it to be a panel. And so one of the, I don't know, Garen, you probably understand the technical terms for this, but in any case, the really bizarre thing is the CDC admitted that there was a problem with the tests they put out, but they never said what the problem was. They just said that it was a shortage of a reagent used to replicate the virus in order to test for it. And so what was it? Either a shortage or contaminated reagent, which they also said. I mean, I haven't been able to nail that down, whether it was a combination. And one article said it was due to sloppiness based on quality control of the reagent due to the crisis. And it's just so amazing to me, though, that the United States was caught flat-footed with the testing, because even though it makes more sense now to know that this other test that China's been using is not as reliable, it's just really sad that we haven't been able to mobilize our own technology to streamline the foundation. Even if we didn't have the coronavirus genome mapped, which, by the way, China published it on January 11th, which was why when the testing was able to, they were able to start making tests, is when China published the genome of it. But the thing is that we haven't had any progress on research and development for the foundation of the test. Even if we don't have the genome, they have this thing called a cycler. And the cycler is what, it's a big machine that they use to process the tests, and when they use the reagent that breaks down the virus and then replicates it. So those machines are proprietary. So Roche has one kind of machine, and Qiagen has another kind of machine. And so the older technology that the CDC said was what you had to use is from 2012, and it only replicates like 89 samples, whereas I saw an article saying that the new machines replicate like 500 samples at a time. But we've known about this for like 2 or 3 years. Now, the supplier of reagents, the only authorized supplier for the CDC, is called International Reagent Resource, and it's based in Manassas, Virginia. And they control all of the distribution of all of the reagents. And they also distribute it to the rest of the world. So they're very tied in with the World Health Organization already. But there's not a lot of transparency about this contractor. They got the contract at the end of 2008 for reagent production for the CDC. And they got the contract renewed in 2018. But as far as whose fault it was that the test didn't work, no, nobody's talking. There's no transparency with this contractor. They've been the same contractor for a whole decade now. And clearly there's like 12 biotech companies based in the United States who have been developing just more reliable technology and faster able to handle more testing for these kinds of tests. But for some reason, they can't even get the machine format together. It's like the conflict between Macintosh and Microsoft. And it's, wow. I mean, it really results in lost productivity. Next, we've known since SARS in 2003 that we were going to need to have diagnostics and be ready for anything. Well, I'm sorry, but the guy that was removed from the National Security Council in 2018, or they say he left, Timothy Ziemer, Senior Director for Global Health Security and Biodefense on the National Security Council, he sure wasn't coordinating and streamlining the different diagnostic companies. He wasn't streamlining and getting the best, the best equipment and technology for testing. And he left in 2018. What was he doing that whole time? Because it's like the Keystone Cops. And, when China and India and I believe Japan have been the biggest emerging markets for in vitro diagnostic sales, like tests and stuff, in the last few years. So clearly, our multinationals, originally started here, were more concentrated on the foreign market and leaving the CDC alone, I guess, because the CDC moves like at the speed of an elephant
I could have died
in
fire.
in a river. Really? Did you almost burn yourself?
Yeah, the stove was
You mean the oven?
on the stove.
Oh no. Okay, let me check that out. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Oh, you want me to open this? Okay. So yeah, we were caught flat-footed. Yeah, Manassas, Virginia, and they've been around forever, by the way. Like, I got so many windows open, I can't even find it. But I think that company in Manassas, Virginia,
Yes,
has been
they
around
have.
since like 1933. I kid you not.
Yes,
And
they have.
I'm not gonna point the finger directly at them because their transparency is so bad. But just the fact that they don't have any transparency is very suspicious to me. And yeah, we got caught flat-footed for sure, but it's decades of this. So I know that I don't even know. The testing thing is really a big hot mess, honestly. But where was I? Oh yeah, what was that guy doing? Oh, and get this, the Qiagen, which is a Netherlands company, based in Germany. And anyway, their CEO quit after they said quit last December after disappointing showings in China. And get this, they make a reagent that replicates the virus for testing. Okay, and shoot. I'm trying to remember now because it's so complicated. Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Emerging markets, a haven for in vitro diagnostics. Abbott, Danaher, Siemens, and Roche to capitalize. Okay, these are all the multinationals that make these kinds of diagnostics. So the CEO of Qiagen, also another, excuse? I need this. I know. I got food coloring on my notes. That's okay. I can still read them. See? Qiagen. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The polymerase. The polymerase chain reaction, okay? It uses an algae. Get this. It uses an algae called Pyrococcus furiosus, and it's mined in Italy on the island of Vulcano. And it's an algae that's heat resistant and it's called an extremophile. It thrives under extreme conditions. Oh, thanks, Karen. I know, isn't he funny? So Pyrococcus furiosus is very reliable in testing, and it's one of the most reliable polymerase chain reaction reagents. And I kept trying to find out if there was a shortage of that, but I could never establish it. But Qiagen's CEO quits last December. There's a acting CEO who's been interviewed on like CNBC about their commitment to helping with this crisis and all this stuff. But this substance, this reagent, is also used to replicate the human genome for China's spying technology and facial recognition, DNA control. In fact, another company that is one of the biggest suppliers of these diagnostic tests pulled out of their China business somewhat because of humanitarian concerns, because it was in the region where they've been allegedly mistreating their Muslim population, and they were using this same polymerase chain reaction technology to grow DNA to spy on their own people. Yet they were able to get the rapid test faster than us. What does that say? What does that say? They're harnessing the power of our multinationals better than we are. So this DNA replication technology is really interesting. There was a previous algae that was used for it, and guess where that was sourced from? The geothermal wells at Yellowstone National Park. I kid you not. So this algae is so resistant to heat that it allows, I guess it allows replication. I guess you need bacteria for that, to replicate a virus so that you can test it, so that you can look at the sequencing of it and tell somebody that they have the virus. And who knew it was that complicated? But we've known for many years that we were going to need to develop faster and better testing, and it really just seems like, I was going to say something not as appropriate to indicate Keystone Cops, but it's just extremely disappointing. I think every one of us probably has some story about how somebody had to wait to be tested already in the last couple of weeks. And so we could have a lot more cases, but do I blame Trump? I blame him only that he should have gotten a hold of these diagnostic testing companies sooner. But as far as whether this guy on the National Security Council would have advised him to do that, no, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Because the CDC is so tied up in bureaucratic language. Everything I read, I've been reading just pages and pages and pages of guidelines for their labs. And yes, it's true. In order to perform the testing, you have to use protective gear. And so it's true we need a lot of guidelines. But obviously, they've been testing people in South Korea, and that's not a totalitarian place where if somebody gets injured, they'll just sweep it under the rug, you know? I mean, we would have heard about it, I guess, if they had like viral injuries when they tried to do the testing. But be that as it may, are these regulations and red tape that surround the whole testing arena and no attempt to streamline the platforms used in the testing, like the centrifuges, the cyclers? I mean, we've needed to do that since 2003. And I also will say that because China and Hong Kong went through SARS in 2003, it's like they had muscle memory on that. And they I don't know why we didn't, with all of our sending people over to Asia, to China, to help with their study of virology and their diagnostic testing, you would think that we would be able to figure out how to learn from their SARS epidemic. But no, doesn't look like any of that happened. And it's actually possible that President Trump's decision to close the border right away to China and now to the newest hotspot. The newest hotspot is Europe. But his decision to close that off just may have saved us. And right now we are showing a low amount of people with the virus. Let's hope that continues. Let's hope we get these testing things online. Let's remember that there's going to be a new drug that will likely be approved by the FDA and has already shown promise against novel coronavirus with patient 0. And I got this from the New England Journal of Medicine, so I'll put some of the links in the description below. But so there is a cure on the horizon. The testing was a joke, but it's being fixed now. And we also know that keeping yourself healthy and strong and hydrated is absolutely essential. So they've also expanded their testing protocol, which was a problem too. And you know, Fauci and the other guy, Redfern or something, Robert Redfern, have been saying that the risk to the general public is low. They've been saying it for 2 months. Again, the risk to the general public is low. And then, boom, all of a sudden, we hear about Italy, and everybody's starting to panic. And then the articles come out on how it's Trump's fault that the testing got bungled, and then he's incompetent. I've been hearing a lot of people say that this shows that he's incompetent. But I think that's a snap judgment. I think that's actually a rush to judgment. That's basically assuming that everything has been working great up until Trump came. That's assuming almost like a baseline. Everything's working great. Okay? But you can't assume that. In fact, every time I look into something, it's kind of a shit show, to be honest. Not everything, we still have the highest standard of living anywhere, and there's a reason why people want to come here, for the opportunity and the structure and the foundation of our Constitution that allows for that. But as far as testing and being prepared for a pandemic, this goes way back. This goes a long way back. Yeah, stay on the alkaline side. Yes, Garen, what would you recommend people take if they don't have a lot of money and they want to get one thing to take to keep themselves strong or keep themselves alkaline? What would you recommend? And while you're going to respond, I am going to keep forgetting I'm on YouTube as well. I am just going to talk a little bit about the blame game. Well, like I said, Trump may be eventually praised for closing that border, because that was not the guidance of the World Health Organization. And okay, good. Baking soda, definitely. Yeah, I'm actually out. I need to go get some baking soda. Anyway, that was not the advice of the CDC and the World Health Organization to impose a travel ban. Screenings also they should have rolled out screenings sooner. But anyway, he may be praised eventually for doing that, and I'll tell you why. Because this guy doesn't assume that everything was running great before he took over, like most of us do. He probably knows that he's not aware of certain details in the system, right? And he's probably aware that he's going to handle a crisis like that eventually. And because he does not know all the factors, such as the testing, such as the nuances about the testing, and the fact that all these multinationals were more focused on their Asia market than they were on helping the government prepare. He knows he doesn't know those kinds of things, so he's going to do whatever he can in his power with his emergency powers to slow it down. And slowing it down is absolutely essential. Now we got a little scare, right? And now we are actually in a position to accept social distancing. You see, in a way, I don't know if we could have even accepted social distancing if we didn't have a little bit of a scare. And God bless Italy, because they have really suffered. And it's because of all the patients with pneumonia. If you need to be on a breathing machine, and there's a shortage of those. So what we did is we all said, oh, holy cow, we better do some things. And now we're all doing our part. So another thing, if you want to have remdesivir administered to you, you have to have a positive lab result of novel coronavirus, and they recommend that you also be hospitalized if you want to use the experimental drug. But you can have your physician request this drug on compassionate use. Anyone can do that. And the website for Gilead is gilead.com. Now, Gilead was actually a place in the Holy Land, and it became part of the Bible, known as the balm of Gilead. But they also say there's a tree that they made the balm from, but I think it's a more ancient recipe that goes even further back, the balm of Gilead. So I don't know much about this company. I don't trust any multinational, but transparency is the key. And so, again, people who are hospitalized with novel coronavirus may ask their doctor to request this drug for compassionate use anywhere in the country. Green foods, yeah. Okay, well, thanks for watching, everybody. It's been a really, 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 really long download of a ton of information that I've been doing pretty much in every waking moment for the past 36 hours. So forgive me if I came on really strong, but I think that this is yet again another example of complete facts kind of having a calming effect on all of us, realizing that, a combination of the American tendency to have a short attention span, we have a short attention span in the United States, and we have a media that is very, very hungry. So we need to know that us preparing for a pandemic, thank you, Garen, us preparing for a pandemic has a lot to do with our history of looking at the short term. We have a great work ethic in this country, but I remember when Japan was kicking our butt with their auto industry. I remember reading that Japan, the culture and the business culture in Japan always takes the long term into the account, and yet the American business culture does not very much. And so that is what we're working against when we're talking about being ready for a pandemic. And we're also talking about talking to each other. These multinationals didn't even bother trying to fight with the CDC about all this over-regulation or, lack of standardization. But they were too focused on making money and selling their diagnostics to China and South Korea. But I will say that that the lack of standardization, which has been a problem with Macintosh and Microsoft also in the computer world, has caused a lot of lost productivity. And I believe that something like that can only be realized when we start high functioning more. We need to think in a high functioning manner. We need to realize that the solution might be right in front of us. Not necessarily monopoly, right? Monopoly is not good, but standardization and streamlining, especially with the centrifuges or cyclers that they use for virus detection, for testing, yeah, probably be a good idea to have the same platform you can just put the sample on and stuff, right? So that does require a little bit of thinking on the part of the government, and of course a lot of people don't trust the government. So what to do? Maybe ethical standards on the part of the multinationals, pharmaceutical multinationals, that basically say, have a code of ethics, and that their best practices would always be for the greater good, that they couldn't harm the greater good. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that you could misuse this law, but, when you're talking about making a profit in China, but then you're ignoring the fact that your whole flow of distribution for you and your competitors in your home country is completely broken, then you're not really going with a set of ethics, because the distribution system at your home country is at least as important as the distribution in places where you're making a lot of money, right? It's at least as important. So I think that corporate reorganization probably should happen voluntarily. It would be interesting to see, but maybe larger ombudsman office, and keep it simple. Definitely keep it simple. But maybe an office of longitudinal study. That the industry, all corporate America comes up with. Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Yeah, you know what? It was really bothering me that South Korea was able to test so many people. I mean, I did not like that at all. And China too. They bought 500,000 test kits that test the blood from a North Carolina-based company. And those test kits are 89% accurate, with not even a very good sample size to determine that, actually, from their studies in their North Carolina company, but they have a Chinese branch. And anyway, that blood test is supposed to be verified later with the test that's the most common and the most reliable. And even among those tests, there's so many different products. And it's very, very confusing and a lot of regulations. So I am glad I finally narrowed it down to corporate myopia. Yeah, nearsightedness on the part of our corporations, multinationals, a lack of interest and will on the part of the public to keep the focus on future pandemic. Probably the government and the executives being more concerned with winning elections than protecting our citizens and protecting the country. It's a combination of a lot of failings, but we are having to look at ourselves squarely in the face right now as we sit in our homes. Look in the mirror. Ask what we can do better as a country and as a steward of the planet. There's the soundtrack. Ooh. And really, really kind of do a lot of research. This would be a good time for everybody to do a lot of research. There are tools and ways to evaluate information whereby you can actually build a better picture of the scene instead of just reading all kinds of bizarre conflicting narratives. I mean, if you're a visual learner, then conflicting partisan narratives are going to be very hazardous to your health. May I recommend that we paint a picture of the scene in our nation and on our planet. What do we see? Do we see patterns? Do we see transparency? Do we see manipulation? And that way you start to see who's trying to deceive. And then you start to see patterns like that. And then you have time now to look into this. You have time to read many, many, many different sources, unless you're a first responder. You have time to say to yourself, now, why does this give me a bad feeling in my gut? And how could this be possible? Oh my God, it actually could be possible. I never thought about that. Things like that until you get where you feel really strong and you can evaluate any piece of information by looking at the source, the URL. You can go on mediabiasfactcheck.org and see they're actually pretty good, although they themselves have a deep state leaning bias, but you start to build your own map. And we can all have our respective bulletin boards with yarn and pins. And then we can get on social media and we can show each other our yarn and pins and pictures and all that. Home test kits would be great. I don't know why they wouldn't be doable. I mean, I was looking at the prices for some of these test kits, and the unit, I mean, you get like 50,000 units. The unit price is like 50 cents. I mean, I was just doing some quick math, but there's got to be a reason. Maybe it's not profitable. to fix the testing situation in the United States. But I just can't believe that. Well, I don't know. I mean, technology is progressing so rapidly with the genomic, replication, that I would think it might be the case like happened in the entertainment industry where, you had these huge operations of post-production with like massive servers in their basement, and they've got all this equipment to produce for the entertainment industry, and then some guy in his basement working on his laptop all of a sudden starts stealing away your contracts. And that's what happened, and that was because of technology progressing rapidly and becoming more affordable. Well, it's possible that we're dealing with this, within the CDC. It's just a question of how rapidly can you downscale and retrain, frankly. So thanks for watching. I know it's been a long talk, but we have more time now. So thanks for spending time with me. I brewed some tea and some chai, and I'm now going to go drink it. And I'll try to check back with you tomorrow. Thanks.